Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So recently Bandai put out another one of their surveys, and usually their surveys give some really interesting insight on what they potentially want to do with the game. And one thing that they highlighted in this current survey is multiple different formats or different ways that you could play the Digimon card game. So right now we only have one official format for the Digimon trading card game. That's going to be basically the game you've already been playing, but here are some alternate ways that you could play the game based on this survey. So please keep in mind that none of these rule sets or formats are official yet. These are just different things that Bandai is thinking on to change up the game to really spice things up and make it more fun depending on the type of player that you are. So with that disclaimer out of the way, we first off have the casual format. So the casual format doesn't really have any new or crazy rule changes. The thing that it's doing differently is that it states that players can redraw their entire hand of 5 cards once per game, which is basically a mulligan. And then on top of the mulligan that the casual format is adding, you also have a 15-card sideboard or side deck to switch your cards in between games in a match of best of 3. So this is a pretty good change to the format just because your deck building designs don't necessarily have to be super greedy, including tech cards or hate cards for particular other types of strategies, and usually those cards are best left in the sideboard, so that way you could tech them in after depending on what your matchup actually is. So I'm a huge fan of the casual format because, well, that's just the format that everyone probably wanted to play initially. Next up, we have the rookie format. So the rookie format states that your main deck is going to be limited to 30 cards, and you can only run up to 3 copies of any specific number card in your Digi-Egg and Main decks, respectively. So this format is basically just trying to condense the game, so that way you have a more tighter or quicker experience, and with a limited number of cards in your deck, especially a smaller one, it really forces you to pick and choose certain cards that you really feel like you need to be running in order to make your deck as powerful as you possibly can. So I think this is just a fun format to play if you just want a quicker or tighter experience. Next up, we have the set or block specific format. So what this format states is you could only use cards from a specific set of boosters, starter decks, or blocks. So right now we only have 1 block currently in the game. I guess technically 2 because we do have block 0, which doesn't have the block icon, but I digress, and this is just limiting the types of cards that you're going to be using based on sets, starter decks, and that block icon. So the more blocks that we have, the more expansive this format gets, where you could choose specific other blocks. So right now we could theoretically run block 0 as a specific block, or once block 1 becomes more fleshed out, then you could run block 1 and etc. So this is going to be a pretty interesting set of formats to be playing around with if you just want to go back into the past and look at the different experiences that each of the different sets in combination with each other holds. Next up, we have the classic format. So the classic format states that non-security battles are based on type, similar to the original trading card game. So in the original trading card game, battles were decided by type, where you had vaccine beating virus, virus beating data, data beating vaccine, and so on and so forth. So it kind of created this rock, paper, scissors dynamic within the card game and within the battles. And then battles between Digimon of the same type or other types that they're not super effective against are decided between the Digimon's DP. So this just adds a rock, paper, scissors element to the game, kind of spicing it up and really changing how you want to build decks, because as of right now, we really haven't focused on those types of attributes in the game. There is just a little bit of use in them, but nothing too specific or particular, and the fact that we do have this alternate rule set really forces you to think more critically about those types of cards and those types of attributes. Next up, we have the DP subtraction format. So the really big rule change that this is adding is when a Digimon wins a battle against another non-security Digimon, then it loses DP equal to the original DP of the deleted Digimon. So as an example, if you have a 10,000 DP Digimon, then you swing into the opponent's 3,000 DP Digimon, yours will obviously win the fight, but at the end of the battle, your DP will drop from 10,000 to 7,000 until the end of the turn. Then the damage is basically reset and your Digimon Digimon will go back all the way up to its 10,000 DP originally. So this is just a new take on how we interact with combat and what combat means for the card game, which is never a bad thing because it really wants you to change up how you want to play the game and different things you could do, because now you actually have the ability to swing multiple Digimon into one Digimon to potentially get rid of threats where that might be better in certain decks than others, and change up various different strategies, because now you actually have the ability to respond to larger threats just based on the number of Digimon you have on the field, which again could influence and change how decks are made and how players play the game, and that seems to be the whole point with all of these different formats. Next, we have the single color format. So the single color format is a pretty simple format where it just states that decks can only include cards of a single color. Multicolored cards can be included as long as they include the deck's main color. So this will affect cards that are actually two color cards, not the cards that are single color that can act as a separate color while it's on the battlefield. So something like a Rise Greymon won't be able to be played in a yellow deck, but something like Magnamon will be able to be played in a yellow deck because that card is also yellow. So it seems like this format is really meant to just limit certain kinds of decks that could be made based on multicolor splash packages, because currently in the game we have a couple of different style of decks that really just want to hard play cards and ignore colors completely, and this format kind of reels those decks in or takes them away by forcing you to think about what your one specific color is doing. Next up, we have the overtraining format. So the overtraining format is one of the more interesting formats on this list, in my opinion, because it allows you to have your Digi-Egg deck include Digimon instead of just Digi-Egg cards. So what this format allows you to do is that your Digi-Egg deck is going to be fixed in a particular order, from descending order, starting from level 3 going up to 4, 5, 6, and even 7. So in Vanguard Overdress, they kind of did something similar to this, where they just literally had perfect rides, where you go from your stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3, and it's hyper consistent, allowing flexibility in the deck's designs and what you could do within that game, and this is kind of a very similar approach to that. Unfortunately, because of this, cards like Mimi or cards that interact with the raising area are going to be banned, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because you're always going to be able to build your perfect stack, and once you build that perfect stack, usually you could do some very powerful or exciting things while playing your various other cards. So it's just a really fun and interesting way to try to reutilize the raising area, and I'm totally down for that idea. Next up, we have the Boss Rush format. So the Boss Rush format is a very simple format compared to some of these other formats, where basically it states that both players start their turn at 10 memory. So you're just always going to have 10 memory to do basically almost anything you want with, and that is going to be a really interesting format because, again, it really doubles down and forces you to think about how you're going to make your approach to deck design, because you're always going to be starting at 10 memory. So you could play more of a Megazoo style, you could play more of cards that have lots of spicy on-play abilities. It's just a very interesting alternate way to try to play the game, knowing that you're always going to start your turn at 10 memory. Next up, we have the Memory Boost format. So the Memory Boost format states that players don't switch their turn when the memory gauge moves to 1 or more onto the opponent's side, but 3 or more instead. So this is basically acting as those memory fixing tamers, where you know the opponent's always going to be hard set to 3 at the very least. So this kind of is a way to change the approach where you know your opponent's going to be always at 3 or more memory. So not only does it give you technically a little bit more memory to play around with, but it always hard sets the opponents to 3 or more, so that way their plays are going to be as powerful and as consistent as they possibly can, based on, well, the base rules of the game and how certain cards are designed. So this, again, just tries to make you change up your approach to deck building and deck design, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because now we don't necessarily need to rely super heavily on those memory fixing tamers to ensure that we're going to have some really fun and powerful turns. So we could actually use those slots in that space to play various other cards, and again, it's just all trying to change out what we can possibly do and how we think about the Digimon card game. Next up, we have the Super Security format. So the Super Security format states that both players start with 10 cards in their security, and all security Digimon have the security ability of skipping the battle, but you get to play this card. So this is just very, very powerful because, well, 10 security is a lot of security to fight through, especially when the Digimon are going to be coming out of the security for free. So that way you could try to spice up not only just how you build decks, but how you approach the opponent's security. Unfortunately, because of the security acting this way, they did have to ban any cards that allows you to recover or increase the amount of cards you have in your security, so that way you could actually have a little bit more of a balanced experience. Otherwise, the format would just be warped to the point where you're just trying to recover and have your Digimon come out of the security for free and then continuously try to recover. So I think that was definitely a smart move on banning just any card that's allowing you to increase your security. So that way you could actually have a little bit more of an interesting experience, because 10 security is a lot of security to fight through. And because the Digimon are going to be playing themselves, we actually could think about utilizing various different on-play abilities, because, well, we actually could use those abilities more effectively now because they're coming out of the security. So I really think this is going to be a fun and interesting format to, again, change the way we think about how Digimon is going to be played. Next up, we have the Guardian format. So the Guardian format states that unless they're the final card in the player's security stack, when a security Digimon wins the battle, then they get shuffled back into the security stack face down, and then direct attacks are still allowed. So this is a change up again on how we approach security, because ordinarily when a security battle happens, if we win or lose the security battle, that security Digimon ends up going away, and this kind of eliminates that, actually forcing you to think about attacking with your higher DP Digimon instead of just attacking it with just any Digimon you can, just to try to deal some chip damage. So this really limits certain types of decks from trying to aggro out. I mean, they still could aggro out if they're lucky enough to win those security checks, because those security checks still happen, but this is just an alternate way on how we could approach security, and because it's an alternate way on how we could approach security, it means that we have to think about the cards that we're actually including and attacking, and, well, again, how we're playing the game differently because of this. Next up, we have the Enhanced Security format. So the Enhanced Security format states that players are unable to attack their opponent directly if they have a suspended Digimon in play. So at the end of the battle, if a security Digimon survives the battle, then you get to play it without paying its memory cost. So this is just, again, an alternate way on just trying to approach how combat is working and the types of cards that we want to be using, because now we actually have to deal with the opponent's Digimon before we're going to be able to deal the final blow. So it's kind of acting like the Sentinel mechanic in a way from a Chrono Clash system, where the Sentinel mechanic is if this card is suspended, then you're forced to attack into it. So it's almost like the reverse blocker approach, and you could still use blockers and various other cards to have a really interesting form of defense when all of your security is broken. Next up, we have the limited card format. So the limited card format is one of the more boring formats, where it states that the main deck can only have 16 unique cards, and then you could run up to 4 copies of each of the unique cards is allowed. So it's just a way to just make sure that you're actually playing with a smaller handful of cards, because ordinarily when you're going about building a Digimon deck, you could have sometimes 20, even 25 unique cards in your deck, but most of the time, from what I've noticed in deck building, I usually hit around 16 or 17 anyway, so it's not like this is that big of a change in terms of a rule set, but it's still something that is limiting the types of decks that you could do and what kind of cards you could play. Next up, we have the restricted/ban list format. So you just play the game with the regular rules with additional or restricted ban cards allowed. So this is kind of basically just stating house bans, where you just all agree that this card is banned or limited, and, well, that card is banned or limited, and then you just play the game that way. So again, not necessarily a super spicy approach to a whole new format, it's just applying self or house bans, so that way you don't necessarily have to play against the decks that you don't want to or the cards that you don't want to see. And then the last alternate format that Bandai had listed on their survey is going to be the multiplayer format. So you could adopt rules to be able to play with, well, multiple different people, such as 2v2 or 4-player free-for-all, or etc. So you could think about adopting the rules from the Chrono Clash system on how to play multiplayer, because they had a multiplayer mode there, and the systems and mechanics are very similar to Digimon, considering Digimon was based off of Chrono Clash system's design. So that's probably the best and easiest way to adopt a rule set in order to play with multiple different people, and well, that is just a different alternative way that you could play the Digimon card game. And then as an honorable mention that they didn't have listed here from my own personal experience is a Singleton format. So Singleton formats are usually really popular because of the different amount of variance that it could bring to the game based on the amount of cards that you're going to be running and the pool that you have access to. So what the Singleton format that I propose is, well, you just run one copy of any specific numbered card. You could even extend this to run one of any specific Digimon if you really wanted to. So there are a couple of different ways you could approach a Singleton format, but I was kind of shocked that Bandai didn't list the Singleton format, considering in various other games, Singleton formats could be really, really fun just because of the added variance of not being able to see cards consistently. But all of these are just alternative ways that you could be playing the card game, and these are just the alternative formats that Bandai was kind of suggesting. It's not necessarily implied whether people have been playing these ways or not, but this is just something interesting to think about because these are different ways we could be playing the game. I do think it's a little bit early, depending on the type of alternative format you're playing or making, to actually be playing an alternative format, but hey, people do what they want to do at the end of the day, and as long as they're having fun and enjoying the game, that's all that really matters. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.